Hello there, Iowa fans, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. That's what it is. I lost my train of thought there. I do a different podcast every day about and lose track sometimes of which one I'm on. I should know this from looking at Scott Document from The Athletic, which podcast this is, but my brain doesn't work that way. It is Thursday, September 21st, a little after 9 a.m. Central Time. Happy Earth, Wind, and Fire Day. Happy birthday to our youngest, 13th birthday to our youngest, to my wife and I's youngest, not Scott and I's youngest. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm talking about my wife and I, and our youngest is 13. So happy September 21st, Earth, Wind, Fire Day, my youngest birthday. And happy Thursday to you, Scott. We've made it to Thursday. It's been, I don't know, kind of a long week. A lot of buildup for this game we're going to talk about at Penn State. CBS, 6:30 p.m. Central Time on Saturday. Scott will be making the trip. He told me before we started recording that he looks forward to this trip whenever he can make it because it's so logistically friendly, the trip to State College. Right, Scott?
Yeah, it's the easiest one, if not in the Big Ten, in the nation. You've got now – there's usually three options of airports to go to. I am going to State College, so that's at least a positive versus Harrisburg or Pittsburgh, like other people go, where a couple-hour drive. But you can't stay in State College unless you're on a bigger bank account than I have. And so I'm going to stay in like Altoona, near Altoona anyway. And so can't wait for that. But no, it's the thing is, though, Rob, we know that there are, as far as environments go, game environments, a whiteout at Happy Valley at Beaver Stadium is it's right up there with I'll put it up there with anybody in the country as far as what the atmosphere will be like. And how Iowa handles that atmosphere will determine whether or not they'll even be in the game because, it's a pretty tough opponent as it is, but the atmosphere of it swallows you up and you let it affect you, it can completely engulf you. Kinnick's the same way.
Yeah, and I think the good thing, if you're an Iowa backer, Iowa fan, is it's hard to remember a lot of cases where Iowa gets overwhelmed in these situations. It seems to handle this type of environment pretty well. That doesn't mean, history doesn't mean it's going to happen now, but Iowa does a good job of preparing the team for that. And, we've said it through the years, Iowa oftentimes relishes the underdog role and being, going into an environment like that. Now you got to do it. You have to feed off of that crowd that wants you to lose, that doesn't like you, that probably will say some things to you.
Yeah.
Particularly after the 2021 game, and we can get into that storyline a little bit. But I kind of wrote in my preview that it's a rivalry. I wouldn't put it there with, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska, but I think it's in that next tier with Illinois, Northwestern, Michigan State. I think it's probably in that next tier.
This one is the most organic of the rivalries.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Good point.
You've got 4 traveling trophies, and I would say, when you get the passion of the players, I think this one is good or better than, I would probably put Iowa State at the top level. And then maybe Wisconsin right behind it as far as players go and in importance, even though Minnesota's most historic. I think for the fans, the hate with Nebraska is palpable. But this one on the field, I don't think there's been a better series for Iowa, under the Ferentz era, because you look back at the games they've won and the ones they've lost, and the individual plays and are just really amazing. I mean, Saquon Barkley, in 2017, then they lost by 1 inch. Basically, if Monty Hooker was an inch taller or raised up one hand instead of two, they tip away that pass, they win that game. Or, 18, Noah Fant going, like this at the snap, and then there's an interception at the goal line versus 2 years ago, versus 6-4 and Adrian Claiborne's block and all that stuff. So and it's organic because they have no reason to really have anything in common. For the longest time, they were the outposts of the Big Ten. Now they're clearly not, but they're 800 miles apart. There is just, other than having cows outside of town, there's really not much there. But they both play, kind of a similar brand, or they certainly did for a long time, brand of football, and physical, tough, and it's a really interesting series, I think, when you get down to it. And this one has the potential to be very explosive on the field and competitive among the teams, way into the fourth quarter.
I think Kirk Ferentz's his history with Penn State and being from out there has helped build what this has become. If you look at, the win out there in 2000, which I covered, was an important win for Kirk in terms of rebuilding the program. And I remember here I was in that little room that they put us in for the post game, and it's connected to the Iowa locker room. And I remember hearing that celebration in my mind still. It's just one of those moments that you remember through the years. And then 2002 with Iowa getting a big lead, Penn State coming back, Iowa holding on for a really important victory, obviously, that year. And then, as Scott mentioned, 2004, the 6-4 game, that kind of laid the foundation for where we are now. And then you just go through the Daniel Murray kick and Claiborne block punt, scoop and score. All the memories that we've had through this series have just been really, really entertaining. We've been entertained a ton by this series, and that's, like what Scott said, organically makes it such a good series. I put Iowa State just kind of like Scott, on another level, and I was looking in my preview more at like Big Ten schools and kind of the connections there. And if this was 20 years ago, the Iowa-Illinois rivalry is different than it is now. It's faded for whatever reason. Northwestern's had its moments, but now, without Fitzgerald, they're not as good of a program. It's just, you wonder where that's going with the expansion of the Big Ten, how much they're going to play. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting, Scott, to see what happens with this Penn State series now, with Iowa having, at least prior to the the double expansion from the Pac to the Pac-12, how much Penn State and Iowa will actually get a chance to play with the new scheduling.
Right. You look at, two more teams. It would have been with just USC and UCLA at least every other year. They would have played 2 out of every 4. So that's a really good. Now it's going to be, you think about 1 every 2 to 3 years. And that's the way it's going to be with everybody outside of the 3 you play every year. So it's unfortunate, but it's just kind of a byproduct of that. I mean, you talk about polar opposites in a lot of ways. You look at this series, and Iowa wanted maximum protected rivalries. They got 3. Penn State didn't care about any, and they got none. And they kind of thrive in that unrivaled genre, where we don't have a rival, and they love that, revel in it, and it seems to work for them. And but you could think back, just about every game has some sort of element that has stuck with this. You could go back to the 16 game where they blasted Iowa, just annihilated them, almost 600 yards. Barkley was phenomenal as always. So is Trace McSorley, and just crushed Iowa. And then Barkley told, my former colleague, Bobby Legesse, that he felt like Iowa quit. And then the next year, that was a hallmark for Iowa when they played at night at Kinnick. And, I think it was Drake Kulik wrote on his wristband, "Never quit." And you saw one of the most epic performances in Kinnick Stadium history by Saquon Barkley and Josie Jewell. And the way, Akram Wadley's, heroics. And then at the very, very last play of the game was when Penn State scored that touchdown. Juwan Johnson caught it from Trace McSorley. And, and you think back to Barkley getting hit in that game, doing his hurdle, and he's getting hit by, I think, 3 All-Americans, or, the first or second team All-Americans on that play. He hurdles Josh Jackson. He gets hit by Amani Hooker and eventually tackled by Josie Jewell. And just, the fervor, with that game. And and then you go all the way up through 2 years ago where they're 3-4 in the country. And then Iowa, of course, the fans and got into the booing, which is a rallying cry for that fan base. And as we know, that fan base is pretty strong. So it's going to be a very electric atmosphere and combative for the Hawkeyes.
We'll dive a lot more into this game, just, X's and O's and storylines and things like that. But let's first just go back and what we saw against Western Michigan, the non-conference overview, where Iowa is heading into its Big Ten play. Penn State has a Big Ten game under its belt already, winning at Illinois last week. But for Iowa, I would say, how do I want to frame the non-conference? Typical of Iowa, where you come out of it, and again, the schedule changes. A few years ago, Indiana was the opener, so it's not like it used to be pretty cut and dry. There'd be, the non-conference games, then you play the conference games. Yeah. That's not the case for everybody anymore, but it is for Iowa. This is more of a traditional schedule for it, and we get those non-conference games. It's wonky. You don't, other than, the two teams other than Iowa State, you don't see a lot. So you don't know what you're going to get. They're throwing the kitchen sink at you. All of these little, all of the different context and nuance to this. Iowa's been inconsistent on both sides of the ball, and it's now got to be consistent in this game against Penn State. But again, we'll have more time to go into that. I just think, you look at the first two games, Scott, Iowa starts fast and then kind of levels off and kind of, jogs to the finish line, if you will. Last week, slow start against Western Michigan, then comes on in the second half and gets some momentum going into this game. Positive signs we've seen, but also some concerns. I would say offensively, the passing game is not clicking, hasn't clicked. Defensively, giving up more big plays than I've seen an Iowa defense give up in quite some time. So to me, those are the two areas that Iowa needs to figure out moving forward.
For sure. Let's go to the defense first, because sometimes it gets overlooked on this. And they gave up some big plays. The thing that I think is encouraging for Iowa is that it was very correctable. I mean, when you take the three big plays really that they allowed against Western Michigan, the touchdown, that was a coverage based issue. Whether I couldn't quite tell, were they in quarters or were they quarter half? I
think it was quarters, but it's hard to tell. You're right. Somebody, at least one person messed up.
Yeah,
if not multiple people.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, was it Wampa or was it Harris? PFF blamed Harris. Harris the other day was very secretive, and I don't know if that means that it was a Wampa issue. I couldn't tell because, they both blew it either way. Yeah. They blew it, and that's correctable. That's communication. That's somebody who's starting their third career game or fourth career game, I guess it is, in Wampa versus somebody who hadn't started in 2 years. And they let somebody get past them. They scored. Good that it happened against Western Michigan and not this week. I think when you look at one of the big long runs, I think it was like 43-yard run or something like that they gave up. That was defensive end crashing instead of containing. And, even if they got past the containment, and that was a veteran defensive end. That was Joe Evans. He usually doesn't do that. And, now it's a teachable moment. And then you look at the pass where it was really a well-designed play, I would say. They put like the tight end in motion, and then he kind of run at the snap, takes off, goes up the seam, and it was a play action fake. And then you had Quinn Schulte kind of break down, and then all of a sudden, oops. And then, he gets past him. Again, correctable. That's not a problem for Iowa. I would say that where my issue with them defensively is pass rush. I think that's one that they've got to get better at. And they can say all they want. Well, they're running quick game against them, and it's true to an extent, but they got to do more than what they've been doing. They've got to be more disruptive, and they got to get there a little bit more often. So last year, I think they had 37 sacks. They've got 3 so far in 3 games.
I liked that they set Nick Jackson in that second half of that game the other day. That worked with Jack Campbell too, quite a bit. Jack was very good at that. I think they may need, Scott, they may need to send a guy every now and then. I know they don't like to blitz, but I think you need to keep an offense honest.
Yeah. And it may be, some things where zone blitzing, and they haven't shown a whole lot that way, which is understandable given the opponents you're facing, at least the first and third ones. You don't show a whole lot because it's in game 4 on and beyond. But so I think, Nick Jackson, this is a traditional type game for him. And, he's made some mistakes in this defense too. Yep. And I think they're more, again, they're not as much physical, except for the pass rush part of it, as they are mental, making dumb mistakes that are correctable. And
there's a little bit of adjustment too, going from, a Mike to a Will. I mean, it's not like night and day, but there is adjustment. We talked about with him, a couple of weeks ago, but he's figuring it out. I don't worry about him.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. In the big picture, by mid-season, he'll be a seasoned vet at that position. And Jay Higgins has exceeded my expectations. He's been outstanding. He's been just absolutely outstanding. MVP of the defense, MVP person, MVP player. They've had some good players there, and he's one of them. But the offense is where things are just weird, and we knew it's better than what it was last year, no question. But the passing game, and the injuries are really going to be impactful. And I think what we saw last week was Cade McNamara getting in his own head a little bit. He was waiting too long at times, and then he was kind of indecisive. That interception at the end of the half was goofy. If he just slings it, it's a touchdown. It's there. But instead, he was looking almost to perfect the pass. And by the time he decided, the safety ran over.
Got to make that throw earlier. Yeah. It was there.
It was there. You sling it, you got it. And I'm sure he saw it a million times this week. And Brian Ferentz, of course, let him know right away what happened.
Yes.
Demonstratively.
Exactly. And, the first game, the running game was off. The last game, it was awesome. You lose your top 2 running backs. That hurts. You've got others that seem to fit the bill. How are they going to perform in a big, crazy environment like this? I think it'll get to them a little bit, but I think is to me, the bigger picture is how will they handle getting hit like a freight train? And that's going to happen. If they're in there carrying the ball, don't fumble it. That to me is going to be the biggest factor in this game. And
pass protection
and pass pro. I think, they were good in the first 2 weeks. They weren't very good last week. And, can Jennings Dunker handle the edge? I really think this is the game to show whether or not he's a guard or a tackle. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be, this is one of those games where, dare I say, people aren't going to like it, but there's no sin in punting. You just gotta play the game to win. And so there's a lot, and I know I've rambled a lot, Rob, but I tell you what, there are concerns. I see them getting better. And I think the offense by week 6 or 7 will be in pretty good shape, but I don't know how it's going to be, this Saturday.
Yeah. And you think about it, this is we're a third way through the season after this week.
Yeah.
And, you talked about kind of, some of the, I won't call them excuses, but reasoning to why there hasn't been a consistent pass rush, because teams are, quick passing and running, quick offense on Iowa and going tempo and things like that. Well, you have to find a way to, although that's probably not going to happen as much this week with Penn State, but you need to find a way. It's kind of like a batter and a pitcher. You have to adjust to what the other is doing. And I think it's similar on offense with, Cade missed a lot of camp. Timing is off. We see that in the passing game. He doesn't look completely comfortable. It's week 4 now. And, to his, according to him, he's feeling better than didn't talk to him this week, but last week he was feeling better than he had since prior to the injury in camp. This is this is, and I think you and I both have written this, and I'm sure we're not alone. This is the game. Why this is a game where why Cade McNamara came to Iowa to play in games like these. This is why Iowa went after Cade McNamara, to have him for games like these. He won this game 21-17 in 2021 as a member of Michigan. They went into Beaver Stadium and got a win. He knows what he's going into, where some of his teammates don't. But it's time. The reasoning and excuses for not playing consistent football no longer work. This has to be the week where you play your best game, where you play your best football.
Yeah, it's got to be, instead of your problem, it's got to be the opponent's problem. You know, the opponent is the one forcing the issue, and they have the defense to do that. They have probably the most complete defense, I think, in the Big Ten. All three levels are outstanding. You know, and Penn State in the past has always had, as we know, linebacker U, and they've always had really good defensive linemen, and they've had decent defensive backs, but this might be the best era that they've ever had there. And you know, Kalen King is as good as there is in the country. So they're going to make plays. What you hope it's not catastrophic plays like a pick six or, you know, an interception at the wrong juncture, kind of red zone interception either way, or fumbles, that type of thing. I mean, they're going to stop you on 3rd and 5. They're going to force you to punt. They're going to, you know, get a tackle for loss, a sack, you know, just they are that good. But you want to make sure it's because of them and not you, because your communication isn't good. You threw a bad pass. They ran a wrong route. All those things are out the window at this point. A third of the way through the season, you should be past that. Miscommunication. I didn't know who I was supposed to block. That's all out the window at this point to me. It's all about, okay, I ran a good route. I put the ball where it needed to be, but, you know, they made a play on it and they're really good too. That you can excuse. That one's like, go ahead, you know, but, some of the miscommunication issues, that's, you know, you've had 3 games to work on that. That's what the non-conference is for. And granted, you would prefer to be playing somebody like Northwestern or Rutgers this week, you know, and so in case that doesn't quite catch up. But yeah, I wrote that story Monday too, Rob, you know, that this is exactly the reason why you brought Cade McNamara in, or for games like this. And going 9-19 the other day was disappointing. And I'm sure it was for him too. And I think he got in his head a little bit. I think he's thinking too much, and he's got to get out of that. You just got to go play. And not having Luke Lachey is a killer for this offense, because he's the best offensive player they've had. And, you know, we've seen great tight ends. 4 starting NFL tight ends currently had played at Iowa. And there were many before that too that were really, really good. Lachey was playing as well or better than any of them through his first 2.5 quarter games. I mean, he was outstanding. And so not having that guy to match up against Abdul Carter, or, you know, name the safety out there, it's going to hurt. But this is why you've also brought in Eric All. Yep. And Cade McNamara and Eric All connected on a 47-yard pass in less than 3 minutes left to beat Penn State 2 years ago. And Eric All is going to have to take a step forward too, because I've seen him miss some blocks that tight ends at Iowa don't miss. You know, even reserve tight ends at Iowa don't miss. He's got to hit those. And so we'll see what happens. Maybe now that kind of sometimes getting thrust into that position will elevate you, make you feel like, okay, I gotta step forward. And maybe Eric All does that as well.
Yeah, they being the Hawkeyes, I think, ran 4 tight ends on the late touchdown or was it Moulton's second touchdown? I think it was one of his touchdowns in the second half, but Iowa went big on that as well. So that's a good sign. You no doubt concur with Scott. I mean, Luke Lachey, I feel horrible for him. Such a good kid, and really was, as Scott said, trending towards, you know, a tremendous season, and you know, a lot of NFL draft talk, all that stuff, and feel horrible for him. And hopefully he gets better quickly and recovers fully and all that good stuff. The good news is that Iowa does have depth at that position, but it is a big drop off, and I think it's similar to running back. You still have LaShawn Williams, and the two freshmen, but losing two of your other. You and I were two of the driving the hype train for Caleb Johnson come into this season. I thought he's had some rough moments early in the season, but still a really, really good runner that you knew would probably get things corrected and will get things corrected. And then Jazz Patterson really showed us what he had against Iowa State. Those are three big weapons to be without this week, Scott.
Exactly. Those are your most talented running backs and your best player on offense.
Yeah.
And that's just really tough for an offense that's still, that wasn't, obviously it was terrible last year and hasn't been real consistent yet. And you remove those three, that is really difficult for this team. And so going forward, you're going to, what do you have to offer that can compete against, one of the best defenses in the country? And I think LaShawn Williams is a really good player. I would not put him in the same athletic category as the other two, but I also think he shows a lot of heart and toughness, and that could be the evener you need when you go to Happy Valley, because you're going to need that kind of element. You're going to need somebody that's grew up rough and had some tough adversity in life and kind of has a chip on his shoulder, and hey, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to ball against these guys. And because if he goes out and has a really good game against Penn State, he may leave the other two behind him. He may be the starter. So he's got that opportunity. Now, the young freshman, Kamari Moulton had a really great, really fantastic debut, I thought. Can he handle this? This could be pretty big. It's different going in the second half against Western Michigan versus 107,000 people chanting Seven Nation Army and Zombie Nation and white pom-poms and plus that defense. That's really the hallmark. I mean, you've got, I don't want to count, but my guess is probably 8 starters will be in the NFL. I mean, they're legit, and it's like going against his own defense in some respects. So hold on the ball. That's the one thing I'll say is, it'd suck to get stopped short at 3rd and 1, but it'd suck more if you fumble on 3rd and 1. So just make sure ball security. And that's kind of what Liddell Betts said yesterday, that he'll point to his arm, when, to make sure, hold on to that ball.
I get a feel, Scott, I don't know if you agree, that we're going to see a lot of Williams. I think the freshmen may get sprinkled in, but I think this is LeSean's game to shine.
Yeah. No doubt. I think one player we might see more than the second running back is Max White.
Yeah.
Because when you get it.
We got on this road.
Yeah. Right.
The drama last week. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When I hit that, and it sucks that kid's name now is connected to that bullshit. But
yeah,
whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Screw everybody for that. You know what? Walk-on kid scores a touchdown with 30 seconds left. Good. He deserved it. 4th down. Hey. His grandfather played for the Hawkeyes. He played for the Iron Man. But pertaining to this game, in 3rd and 7, and you need to give LaShawn a blow, who do you think can pick up the blitz a little bit better? Who do you think can block? He's bigger, he's more physical, he's been in the system a little more. You probably have a little more trust in Max White picking up the blitzing linebacker than you do Kamari or Terrell, and that's no offense to them. They probably are more talented, and maybe in the future it's just another, they're great players, but at this point against this team, you feel like, okay, Max White can probably step up and hit a linebacker and at least stall him. And whereas Kamari Moulton listed at 185, but I'm seeing point guard. I'd be a little worried if I was Cade saying, okay, I've got to, shuffle, deep drop here on this one.
Did the non-conference performance change your view of this team? preseason?
That's a great question. I don't,
because I thought about this I asked myself this question when I was writing my preview last night. I'm like, do I feel differently do I feel better, worse, same? It's hard because it was an uneven non-conference. There were times where you're like, yeah, this is what I thought was going to be really good. And then other times, like, I think Cade's inaccuracy to me so far has been a surprise on the downside. But as you said, Jay Higgins has been great.
Yeah.
And I was worried about that coming into the season.
Yeah. That's the thing. I thought I'd say the negatives for me, or at least the areas that have a little bit more concern than I expected were, one, pass rush. I thought pass rush would be better. And two, I thought Cade would be a little more accurate. Now, I'm probably not as down on him, even though looking at the other day, there was one pass where he launched it and they had an open receiver, and I just kind of turned, and I hate to say it this way, but I said that was kind of Petrus-esque. It was a sideline pass. It was way over his head. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I do think that, I think some of his mistakes, though, are just settle down, just get in there. You're all right. Running game, I figured it would take some time, and I think they've actually, when I looked at the first week, I went, oh no, here you go again. And then I rewatched it and I thought, they're correctable mistakes. And then week 2 against Iowa State, which has a really good defense, not a good offense, but really good defense. I'm like, okay, they're making strides. And then last week it was really good. So I think that they look better than what I expected. I would like to see more out of the wide receivers. And that's kind of collective. It's not just them. It's not just Cade. It's not just Brian. It's everybody. And I think this is a game that they have to do that. And they're playing against, again, one of the best, probably the best secondary they'll face all year, even better than Iowa State. But they have to make sure that they get open and they make plays. If it's 3rd and 8, don't drop the ball, catch it. And if you're Cade, deliver it, not only a chance for them to catch it, but maybe do something with it. So I think that's a great question. I think they're slightly behind where I expected them to be, but they're still on the same trajectory where I think they can end up.
That's good. That's a good way to frame it, I think. I'm kind of in the boat with you, whereas although I've been surprised by Cade not being as accurate, I also, in my mind, am thinking how much time he missed in camp and how long he was out, last year in the spring and all that. So kind of giving him a mulligan there. Now, if it starts to go into the next couple weeks, then it becomes more of a concern. And same with you, the wide receivers, we see flashes here from, Seth Anderson or Deontay Vines or Nico or Caleb Brown. They've all had kind of moments where you're like, okay, we're starting to see it. And it just isn't it's been inconsistent. So, but that's Iowa football really early in the season for most seasons, that you have to work out the kinks. There's development that goes on. Can you see kind of the picture coming together? And I think Scott can see it. I can see it. And this week is certainly going to tell a lot of that story. That kind of brings into focus, okay, this is one of the nation's top teams. How does this Iowa team match up? But even then, Scott, and we'll dive in more to Penn State here after we take a break. Whatever happens this week doesn't define this season.
No question. And that's going to be really hard to mention to people as we get going, because they live and die with the results. And even if this goes poorly, it doesn't really mean anything. It means they just go back to work. And
you talked about 2016, that disaster, and then what happened the next week?
Right. And they'd be the number 2 team in the country who was even better, better defense for sure. And so I tell you what, let's say I could see a million scenarios playing out here. I could see 34-10, they lose, and I could see James Franklin, with 30 seconds left, sticking the knife in and twisting it at the end. And, but if that happens, in the big picture, this will not be conveyed for a whole week, probably the whole next month, but in the big picture, so what? They come back, they play Michigan State. They beat Michigan State. They beat Purdue. Then you go play Wisconsin and Minnesota. and if you beat them, you are exactly where you want to be.
Yep.
Win the West. I mean, I don't think anybody looks at this team and says they're going to win the national title, but I think a developmental program like Iowa, with the trajectory it has, if you can see them getting better week by week by week by week, then you start to put the mosaic together on each tile, and you're like, okay, I can see it coming together, and I can see that coming together. Injuries are the wild card, though, because when I look at Luke Lachey, I'm thinking, damn, that is a huge piece lost. The running backs, one or two of them, one of them will be back probably for Michigan State, maybe both of them by Purdue, and they'll be okay in the big picture. But if they can continue to progress, damn the result. Now, okay, social media is not going to like it, but big deal, and if they win, then they have to guard against the other side, which probably is more detrimental to this team, which is if they do win, then they got to guard against, okay, now we're going to get everybody's best shot, and they got to kind of tamp things down and be more mentally sharp, because then you're going to get Michigan State coming right at you, and you're not going to see your flaws as clearly as you would if you lose.
Perspective. It's important. Perspective and context, both are very important and often ignored. But what can you do? Yeah, in this the landscape that we live on through social media and what have you. But good time for a break, Scott. Yeah. Support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Systems Unlimited. Great work in the community for over 50 years. We thank them for that and their support of the podcast. Let's hear from a few more folks that support the podcast, and then Scott and I will be back on the other side to dive in a little bit more from what to expect from Penn State. Hey, we made it back on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Thank you to our sponsors. We appreciate their support. Scott, let's see here. Let's dive in a little bit on Penn State. I had some numbers here for folks. Get us ready here. Let's see, what did I have here? There's the algorithm, a formula I looked up last night that has strength of schedule. So far, according to this algorithm, Iowa's strength of schedule is 67th among 133 FBS programs. Nittany Lions are 55, so not a lot of difference there in terms of who they've played so far. If you look at Penn State on defense, it is ranked 33rd nationally in rushing defense, 3.1 yards per game, and 11th in passing efficiency defense. Iowa is 40th against the run, 3.5 yards a carry, 17th against the pass. So sets up like a defensive battle, Scott. But I would say the quarterback comparison is an interesting one, because you have a guy who's experienced playing here, as we said, and then a young gun who has got a lot of hype and has lived up to it to date. But this is the toughest defense he'll face so far.
No question. And I think it's a really interesting potential pass the torch game. I mean, if Drew Aller has a chance, if he plays well in this game, to become the next, hype guy in the Big Ten at quarterback, probably passing the mantle from finally somebody outside of Ohio State, right? CJ Stroud. But last week was not a great week for him. And it wasn't a great week for their receivers. I think their receivers are not maybe as good as you think they are. When you look at, he was 16 of 33 against Illinois, and this Illinois defense They may have the best defensive player in the Big Ten, and Johnny Newton. He's awesome, the defensive lineman. But the rest of the unit, I mean, they lost 3 outstanding. Yeah. Oh no!
I caught you.
I'm glad it's not Michigan State. But no, when you that they lost 3 outstanding defensive backs from they're in the NFL and they're really, really good. So I think Illinois is a good competitive defense, and they were able to do what they needed to do to win. They forced a lot of turnovers too, and that was not his best game, but I don't think the numbers are fair to him. I rewatched it a couple of times and thought, he made some passes that make you go, okay, this guy's got it. And you've got to be careful of that and cognizant of that, can't let their receivers get down the field on you, or you're going to be, in dangerous territory. But when you start to, it's easy to get kind of this runaway train of, wow, this team's so good and this team's so great. But, is this running back combination? Oh my God.
Freudian slip there.
Yeah. Combination is not like what we saw. Allen and Singleton are very, very good. They're probably NFL running backs, but are they better than Barkley and Sanders? No. There's no KJ Hamler out there. There's no Jahan Dotson out there. There's no Pat Freiermuth out there. Theo Johnson, Iowa wanted. And I would argue that Theo Johnson is a poster child for why he needed to go to Iowa. He had the talent, and he's not as good as he should have been. And, I'm honestly, I'll look at, compare him with Luke Lachey, and Luke Lachey was at a lower starting point with potential, much better, much more full service tight end than Theo Johnson. And then their offensive line is good, but not as good as it should be. I think their left tackle's outstanding.
Yeah, he's a man.
Yeah. And he'll be a top 5, top 10 pick in the draft, but and their quarterback is full of potential, and he may be as good as they've got, but, and I don't think he's like Christian Hackenberg, it's like, oh, this guy's great. And then all of a sudden he's not so great. So I look at this offense and I think
that one hurts.
Yeah.
That reference hurts as a Jets fan.
Yeah. Oh, I know. They really sold out for him. They went full scale potential on that. So, I'm like, Iowa's played better Penn State offenses and held them down and competed, and they could do the same here. And when you look at, in the past, I look at like the 17 game, and when you're seeing Barkley do what he did, and Pat Freiermuth, I think, was out there, and or was it Gesicki? I can't remember. They were really good tight ends. I'm sure Clifford or McSorley, they had some dudes, and I don't think this offense is quite there, but Aller has that potential to be more than just a guy who gets a late round draft pick. I mean, he's got elite potential, and this is his game to show it against a much better defense that, Illinois had man coverage. Iowa will have, quarters for the most part, quarter, half, and they've got elite defensive backs who will be in the league. And if he tries to throw the ball like a man route, there's going to be a ball going the other way. And if it's number 3, it's going for 6.
Iowa was one of the first offers for Drew Aller. And I looked in my contacts, and if you look at the top name there,
yeah,
I can't give you his number, but it's in my phone. So
awesome.
Interviewed him, and nice kid, and would have been nice for him to be in Iowa City, but I certainly understand him choosing Penn State. And I'm with you. I think, McSorley and Clifford were gamers. Those guys were just they kind of like Cade. I think those two are in that similar mode, whereas Aller's in that, if he can hit his ceiling, that's big time. He's got those type of tools that put him at another level, as Scott said, and 2 really good running backs as well. Can Penn State run against Iowa? Because if Penn State can run the ball against Iowa with those 2 guys, then that's going to make Aller that much more efficient. If Iowa can hold up against the run and Aller gets impatient this is usually when Iowa has them right where they want them. If the quarterback gets impatient and tries to force things, that's when and you can see that with young quarterbacks.
Yes, absolutely. Against a defense that plays almost exclusively zone, except for on the goal line. And he's trying to find that opening, and he's getting impatient, and he doesn't want to dink and dunk and take the ball up the field. Clifford was good about that. He was able to do that, and he was a pretty good athlete. I think Aller's got athletic ability like Trevor Lawrence, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That's a good comp.
A really good athlete, but I think Clifford was a little bit more of a, he was a tough dude. I mean,
McSorley the same.
Yeah, McSorley could run. He was really good. He can handle that RPO game better than just about anybody I've seen. I just think that, if he's trying to find that opening, and he sees what he thinks is a man route, and then the safety's there, that's when Iowa gets them. And then, the one thing about having a passionate fan base, and Iowa has the same problem at home, is that you make a couple of mistakes, then they come back at you. Boo and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's something that they've got to be careful about, because if he throws an interception. Now, what Penn State needs to do is, Iowa's defense usually suffers right out of the gate against a good script, because people know what they got. They go after it. It's round 2. It's round 3. It's when Iowa can, almost like, I don't want to mix my analogies here, but it's like with a pitcher, and you're going against a pitcher who's got his great stuff right off the bat. It's really hard to slow it down, and then you get a second crack at him or a third crack at him, and you can kind of slow it down. You just got to make sure don't give up a touchdown on the first drive. Don't let them go up the field on you easily. If they go get a field goal, you'll survive. But anyway, yeah, I like Aller a lot, though. I think his potential. It's untapped, but and this could be a statement game for him. If you look at it the other way, that he goes out and beats a good Iowa defense that's been among the best in the country, and I still think is probably pretty good, then he can put a statement. And in a year where you don't really have a Heisman candidate, if he goes out and plays outstanding football, it puts him in that conversation. And then they've got some really epic games coming up on their schedule too.
Yeah, and if Penn State gets a impressive win here and plays well against Iowa's defense, with how Ohio State and Michigan have performed to date, and Michigan hasn't played anybody.
No, they've been terrible.
You start to hear more of Penn State maybe being the favorite in the East. I think we're starting to get there a little bit now, but I think a win here against the top 25 Iowa team, if the Lions look good on offense, then that discussion starts to happen. This reminds me a little bit of Iowa and Michigan last year, where different scenario, was at Kinnick Stadium, but a younger quarterback. Mm-hmm. McCarthy, I thought, handled it really well. He took what Iowa's defense gave him. If Aller can do that, it's going to be tough for Iowa, but that's a big if. Guys get impatient. They don't want to dink and dunk, as Scott said. They try to take their shots down the field, and they play right into Iowa's hands. If Iowa, I think from Iowa's perspective, Scott, there needs to be some deception to do some things that Penn State isn't expecting. I don't think you can just go in there, and maybe you can just out execute the other team, but I also think you need to find ways to put your players, particularly on offense, in position to make some big plays. You think back to the Nico Reganey catch a few years, plays like that. And when they're there, you got to connect, because there's not going to be a ton of them.
Right. That's the biggest point there, Rob, is when you look on offense, you can play conservatively.
And also block Abdul Carter. Find out where he is. He's number 11.
Yeah, right. Keep him around. Pork Chop Robinson, make sure you know where Kalen King is at every snap, and really only throw there if somebody is open, that type of thing.
If he falls down.
Yeah, if he falls down. Don't overthrow anybody. But that's perfect spot that you look at, like the Iowa State game, and there was a couple of overthrows that,
Yeah.
If they were connected, those would have been major plays in the game. You cannot miss on this team. You've got to make sure that you hit those big plays. And it could be, maybe you got a flea flicker in your pocket. The things that Iowa, like Iowa State game, let's look at it that way. When they were up, 10-0 early in the second quarter, and Iowa State punted, they were like at their own 15 or so to start a drive, and they're in 22 personnel, 2 tight ends, fullback, running back, 1 wide receiver. And I think I looked at Tom Kakert and I said, this is when you go play action deep on them, because you're in a running formation. They're all bunched up. They expect you to run, play fake, hit your receiver deep, or hit the tight end in the seam.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, what they do, they ran with Johnson, and he got a 5-yard loss. Those are the plays that you've got to be cognizant of. And I'm not saying if it's 3rd and 17 after a holding call and everybody's, doing zombie nation and stuff, that you just don't just say, let's run a draw and punt. That's fine. Live another down, but make them, don't give them any tendencies, go against your tendencies a little bit. And that seems to be
especially on those early downs.
Yeah. Pass on 1st down, run on 3rd and 7 once in a while. And that's the thing, is it's an instantaneous reaction that fans will have. Oh, what a terrible call. It's like, it's a big game. I look at the Mississippi State game. I always go back to that game when I'm like, there was no way they were going to run on that team. Not with Jeffrey Simmons and Jonathan Abram and Sweat. And yet they had to keep doing it, at least showing it. So then what you could do is you suck them down long enough till you can play fake and go over the top. And that's what you kind of have to do here. And they've shown in the past against Penn State that they're willing to do stuff like that. Remember the fake punt in 18, and it was there, and and then the play where it was like 4th and 1 at midfield, and TJ Hawkinson was so wide open. I mean, you could have punted the ball to him, and Stanley overthrew him. He had a horrible game, probably his worst game as a quarterback. And you just think about that stuff. And those are the plays you got to connect on. You can't miss. And you come at the king, you can't miss, right?
Yeah, we hear those cliches, make the makeables, control what you can control. That's really the base starting point for Iowa this week, right, Scott? They have to limit mistakes, and when plays are available, when you make the right call, you have a play offensively that is available, you got to make it. You can't. There just aren't going to be. It's silly to think against the defense that's that good that you're going to have 60 minutes of opportunities. You're going to have a few here and there, and you really have to cash in, or it's going to make it that much more difficult to pull off this upset. And Iowa, I think last I looked, 14.5. We'll get to our picks here in a second, but I think a couple touchdown favorites. So that lets you know kind of, and the number's gone up a little bit too. So I was watching, I think Joe Fart. Boy,
we're all over the place today.
I said fart. That's not his name. Fortenberg. What's the guy's name for ESPN? The gambling guy, Joe Fortenberg. I think it's Fortenberg. It's not Fartenberg. It's Fortenberg. He was talking about a lot of sharp money, big money came in early this week on Penn State. So Iowa is clearly, it's not even debatable, a heavy underdog here. And I think I saw, I looked on Action Network last night, like 90% of the bets are coming in on Penn State. There's really not, Iowa is not getting much of a chance here. Again, if you like the underdog role, if you're Iowa, piping in noise during practice this week, trying to replicate what they're going to see at Beaver Stadium, you got to play clean football.
Yeah. They've always relished being in this role, and Ferentz has been really good in adverse situations. And this is an opponent that gets his blood going. So he's going to enjoy this moment, I think, but you've got to match it. You got to play clean football. And I think there's a lot to Penn State being that good. I think they are that good. And when you look at the big picture, Rob, this is a really important game for them. because they've got Michigan and Penn State or Ohio State on the agenda too, and Maryland.
You know which is
capable.
which? Are they at Michigan and or Penn or Ohio? I know
they're at Ohio State, and they got Michigan at home. Yeah, so yeah, it's still going to be tough. I mean, last year I think Michigan ran for like 400 yards on them. So you're going to have the stakes are higher for Penn State. They've got to win this game. And when you look at their non-conference schedule versus Iowa's, and I mean, well, theirs isn't complete because they did play Illinois last week. I would say that the opponents have been somewhat comparable. Penn State's have been a little bit better and a little bit worse, if you want to say that. I mean, I think West Virginia and Iowa State are comparable in different ways. I think Iowa State has a better defense. West Virginia probably a better offense. Similar type teams. I think Delaware is terrible, and they blew them out like they should. And then Illinois, they're probably a little bit better than anybody Iowa's played, but I wouldn't say that they're a team that you got to be too worried about today. I mean, maybe later in the year, but so I think this is a really interesting matchup because I think they both kind of have the same type of background 3 games in. It's just Penn State, as always, has elite athletes, and if you play it even, you're going to win. But it's supposed to be rainy. It's supposed to be cold. And if Iowa could drag them into the mud and Iowa could play ferret's ball, punt, stop, and then again, just kind of force them to make a mistake and take advantage of it. It may take 3.5 quarters to do it, but if you can do that, then they could be in position to steal this game and steal their soul while you're at it.
I was asked this question. I did an exchange with Mark. I think it's Wogenrich from Penn State, the Sports Illustrated site, Penn State. We did a question exchange this week, and he asked me what my sense was from the Iowa side, how it views what happened in 2021, the injury gate, and those that follow Iowa football know what I'm talking about. So we don't need to go down that road and the fans booing and things like that. How much that's a factor for Iowa? And then I asked the same question of Mark. He seems to think that it's something Penn State is kind of rallying around.
It is.
I don't get that sense as much from Iowa. But Iowa does a better job of keeping that stuff behind the locker room walls and not letting it out for us to see. But I still sense that this is more a Penn State thing than it is an Iowa thing.
Clearly it is, and I can understand it. I mean, if you think about it, they lost a couple of players for a significant amount of time. I mean, what was it? It was Mustafa, was it Sam or PJ? I think it was PJ, defensive tackle, out for the season. And he's getting booed. Sean Clifford leaves the game. I don't think he got booed, but those are things that stick with you. I mean, can you imagine if the Luke Lachey injury happened this week and he's getting booed? That'll stick with your fans. Your injuries, they're booing you. That's kind of, you're going to feel like that's classless. There were a couple of situations, though, I thought that Penn State took dives on the field, that they flopped a little bit and which is weird because Iowa really wasn't going tempo. It was just kind of and I can understand.
That's a known strategy, Scott. You got to stop Iowa's offensive tempo.
Yeah. All one play of it, It'd be funny if I could see them, and Franklin is a vindictive sort, and I could see him doing things to just rub it in their face, if he gets the opportunity, like I said, 30 seconds left and he's on the 1 yard line and they're up by 17 points. I could see him, instead of calling a timeout, have one of his players drop and then come off the field and then go in and score a touchdown just to throw a middle finger in the air type of thing. I could see that. And it is a massive rallying cry there. I've heard it from our Penn State writer, that I did a Q&A type thing with today, and is that Audrey? Yeah, it's Audrey Snyder. So yeah, they have been talking about this for years. And one of the people, she wanted to find there's like an Iowa fan who's like a meme, he's like, oh, and he has become like the poster child out there.
Has anybody found that guy?
No. People won't give him up. But, which is probably for the best for him. But damn, it's not this isn't just I'll just let it go thing. No, there's no let it go with them. They are mad.
And I think, but even before that, I don't think James Franklin and Kirk Ferentz were on each other's holiday card list, so to speak. And I think, again, this series has just kind of brought that out organically, which is okay. Yeah. And sometimes we focus, I think, too much on, the extra stuff, the window dressing, the Max White scoring a late touchdown, and the outrage over that. And then you've got, it just seems like the drama overshadows the actual games more and more these days. And I don't want to get on my soapbox, but this is too good of a game. This is too good of a matchup to get too wrapped up in the injury gate. At least for me, if you want to partake in that, go ahead. Fans out there, I'm excited to see these two teams match up.
Yeah. I was honest then. Maybe it was a contrary opinion locally. I feel the same way now. I don't like it. I don't like the booing. Yeah, if somebody just kind of falls and then gets up, then I can understand some jeering and stuff like that. But when players went down, I'd rather them fans wait before they express themselves negatively like that, because again, when they lose, they lost a pivotal player in PJ Mustipher. He was really good for them and a defensive tackle, and they went really south after that game because Clifford wasn't able to play, because Jack Campbell knocked him out and just stuff like that. And I think they lost to Illinois, I want to say, in that 9 overtime 2-point fest. And that I didn't like that part of it. And they're going to use that. And it probably will be even in the future, fans will use that. But yeah, I'm with you where I like talking about the game once in a while and the matchups and how this could work and how this might not work. And I think we're there with this. And it's always interesting between these two teams. I think styles make fights, as they say in boxing. And I think it's the same way here.
It's kind of that booing where we're not booing we're not booing Spencer Petras. We're booing the coaches. Well, how are you going to differentiate? And we're not booing Mustipher getting hurt. We're booing some guy who's faking it. Well, you're booing everybody. Yeah. So there's no, you're not separating. You're not calling out the rat, as Kirk said. Yeah. You know what I mean? You're also being really insensitive to a kid that lost the rest of his season. So and we'll see how this manifests itself, Scott. Sometimes when you're motivated by revenge, it backfires on you. So to me, it really comes down to who has the best game plan on Saturday and who executes it. I don't think looking back at what happened in 2021 is going to decide who wins this game.
No, it's always for the fans more than the players, because as we know, once you get into the game, it's about who executes their plan, who plays better, once you get smacked really hard on the field, and you will, and they all will, then it comes back to earth about doing what you need to do to win, executing. It's for the fans. The fans are the ones, and we always get kind of wrapped up in this emotion of games sometimes. From the fan perspective, they can't, there's no way they're going to lose to these guys, like old Northwestern games, like they beat them last year and ended the 9-0 streak. And then they go to Evanston and still find a way to lose or, whatever. And that's the thing here with the fans, that they can be as wrapped up as they want, and they can turn the atmosphere to the point where it impacts Iowa's performance if Iowa allows it to. Now, Iowa conversely can flip that. We saw that in Ames a little bit, Rob, where it was once they took control of the game early, that place was quiet. That place, and especially when it was 17-0, it was like, yeah, here we go. They're done.
Yeah.
And now they put themselves back in position to compete, but that's what Iowa needs to do is execute, play well, play punt ball, don't give up the big play, force everything there. And if it's a competitive game and it's within a field goal at halftime, you're right where you need to be. And, they just have to make sure to do it because, and playing a team like Penn State is the biggest factor of all.
No doubt. Muck it up, make it ugly. I think that's Iowa's path to victory and limit mistakes. Can't make a lot of mistakes against a team that's good on the road and expect to win. Have to play good football. It's hard to see a path to victory for Iowa if it doesn't play its best game of the season. So, all right, Scott, let's turn to our picks before we get out of here. And as you referenced before we started recording, I had a good week and you did not, which is really weird.
Awesome. Talk about an awesome week. You were 10-3. I was 8-5. So we
Take it to the bank.
Yeah, we are now tied at 22-16.
We're making money for people.
Yeah, really, when you think about it, it's easy to go, I can't believe I missed that pick. But frankly, when you're above 500 going against the spread, that's pretty good.
It. Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Now that we've talked ourselves up, we're sure to crash this week. So
yeah, I think they get it.
Tread lightly.
Yeah, when you start to get in Big Ten play, that's when things get a little, when the spreads change a little bit.
Yeah.
But like the first one, that's a Friday night game. I hope I can watch at least a little bit of it by the time I get to Happy Valley. But Wisconsin -6.5 at Purdue.
Yeah, I saw this one last night. I don't like this game at all. I don't have a feel for either one of these teams. I don't think Purdue is very good, but I don't think Wisconsin is either. I think Wisconsin's the better team, but night game on the road, I'm going to take the points because I think it's probably a closer game. I think Wisconsin wins, but I'll take the 6.5.
Okay. I'm going to go the other direction, but I don't know that I don't have a feel for Wisconsin either. I don't know if they're going to be, hey, this is the one game where they break out and they looked the part, or is this going to be just a continuation of this junk ball? Because last week took them a long time to break out against Georgia Southern, and of course they lost at Wazoo, and that should be
overhaul an offense. It's going to take some time.
Yeah,
and just wonder if they're going to have it clicking in a few weeks, or when the black and gold heads north. We'll see.
Yeah.
This will be a good indication, though.
Yeah, and at some point, you just wonder when. Will Luke Fickell go to Phil Longo, their offensive coordinator, who's more of an air raid guy, and say, we've got Braylon Allen, man. We're going to have to do something here. We've got these still 340-pound linemen. Let's do something with these guys, or we're going to continue to lose these. I think this week is probably that litmus test week, that if they don't play well, then maybe they do make that alteration. But big noon kickoff on Big Ten Network, though. Undefeated Rutgers at undefeated Michigan, -24. Harbaugh's first game back for the mighty Wolverines. They've been a real gambling disappointment, I would say, without Harbaugh. I think all 3 games they failed to cover, and they had huge spreads, but they played terrible teams. And so they fooled me 3 weeks in a row. I'm going to go with Rutgers and give me the 24 points.
Is it 24 or 24.5? Straight 24?
I wrote it down as 24.
Okay.
So.
I saw it 24.5 the other day, but it must have come down a little bit. I
wrote it like a Monday. So
okay. Good.
Okay.
And I'll take the 24. I think Rutgers is pretty good defensively, and Michigan will win the game, but I think Rutgers can stay within that number.
Yeah. It could be 24-7.
Yeah.
Something like that where they're competing. Florida Atlantic at Illinois -14. I don't know. Illinois is just are they back to being Illinois, or are they going to rebound? And I always pick wrong, it seems, with this team. I'm going to go with I'm going to go Florida Atlantic. I think Illinois wins, but I don't like this team right now. I just don't like watching them.
No, they're a mess offensively. I watched that first half against Penn State, and they just awful offensively. Having said that, I'll throw the 14 points and take Illinois.
All right. Maryland -7 at Michigan State. That's the NBC game. NBC.
That's a Saturday night?
No, that's afternoon because it goes into they've got a big game Saturday.
Oh, they've
night.
got the Notre Dame, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I'm going to go with Maryland, and I'm going to throw the points, even though it'll be fascinating to see if D'Antonio and Harlan Bennett could put together a scheme to kind of slow down Maryland's offense, but I don't think they will. So I'm going to go with the Terps.
I'm with you. Throw the 7. I think Michigan State stinks.
Yeah. Louisiana Tech at Nebraska. Nebraska -20. Are the Huskers back?
Good defensively.
Yeah, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes on this game anyway. I'm going to take the Cornhuskers and throw the 20.
I'm with you.
Okay. Akron, not to be confused with Akron, at Indiana -16. I'm going to take the Hoosiers.
I will agree.
Akron is not a very good team. All right, here we get into let's go with one of the Big Ten games here. Minnesota -12 at Northwestern, and this one's got some interest to me. I mean, I think that's a really high number, and I don't think it's a high number, and I can just see Minnesota either blowing them out or it's close and nip and tuck. And I'm going to go with the latter. I'm going to go with give me the Wildcats and 12.
Who is this again?
Minnesota -12 at Northwestern.
I'll take the Gophers.
All right. Yeah, it's either going to be like 34-0 or it's going to be like 27-24 one way or the other. But
Big Ten West, soak it up while you can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, one of the two marquee games of the week, the Ohio State University -3.5 on the road at the mighty Fighting Irish of Notre Dame, and I am going to take Irish eyes are smiling. I'm going to take the 3.5, and I'm going to take the Irish to upset the Ohio State University.
Yeah, I like that probably more than I should have, so I won't bet actual money on it, but I really like Notre Dame +3.5.
Okay. All right. Finally, the 14.5 number, Iowa at Penn State Saturday night. I can see a lot of scenarios playing out, which is kind of like what happens every year on why I screw up in the NCAA tournament brackets, because I can always see the 5 and 12 matchup going either way, and it usually does, but it usually goes the wrong way. But this case, 14.5 is a high number against the Hawkeyes. I think Iowa can stay in the game. I don't know about win, so I'm going to give me Iowa and 14.5.
I'm going to take the Hawks in the 14.5 too. In my preview, I've got Penn State winning this game 24-13. Okay. So 11 points. So I don't think it's a blowout. And if it is a blowout, I think that's not good news for Iowa, because I think if one of these teams is going to win by a blowout, it'll be Penn State. But I think this is a game that goes into the fourth quarter. And I've tried this week, Scott, to find it in me to pick an upset here, but this is, I think, far and away Iowa's hardest game this year. And if it can win this one, sky's the limit. But I just don't. I just think Iowa's got to play really, really well, and Penn State's got to be off a little bit. And I can't, in good conscience, pick the team that is the underdog in this spot.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I'm 23-16. Penn State. I think Iowa will compete. I don't know. I'm trying to rationalize what scenario can I see Iowa winning, and it's usually pulling them down to their level and fighting in the mud. And and when I do start to go, well, there's just no way they can win, then that's when I start to think, well, again, offensively, are they better than they were with Barkley or Jahan Dotson or Pat Freiermuth or No, they're not. They've got potential. I think Singleton's a really good player. I think Allen's a really good running back. I think Aller could be their best quarterback in a long time, maybe a Kerry Collins eventually. Not now, not today, but, to me, if Iowa had a better pass rush, maybe I'd see it, and maybe they do, and I just don't know it, but I haven't seen it yet. So I'm not going to go with Iowa yet. I think Iowa can compete. And I think if Iowa can compete, I think it can provide a learning, teachable experience for the Hawkeyes that, hey, we went in the best environment in the Big Ten, the toughest environment. We threw down and we played well. We didn't win, but we learned a lot about ourselves. Let's lick our wounds. Let's get back to work. And there's no reason why that they can't beat everybody else on the rest of their schedule and end up in Indianapolis and maybe play them again. But at this point, I haven't seen enough consistency for Iowa on either side of the ball to make me think that they can beat one of the top 10 teams in the country.
Really looking forward to this one and finding out. I think the best part of this is just finding out more about Iowa and how Iowa has been able to, clean things up if it can for a game like this, because it's going to have to play clean football, as we said throughout this podcast. All right, folks, thank you for listening to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. We appreciate that. We appreciate the support from our sponsors as well. Enjoy the game this weekend. Scott and I will be back on the Hotspot next Thursday, 9 a.m. to talk to you again, and we'll review this Penn State game and look forward to Kinnick under the lights against Michigan State a week from Saturday. Until then, have a good weekend.